Chapter 1. Shadows of the past. Alessandro Romano moved through the grand ballroom with the ease of a man accustomed to attention and power. The charity gala was filled with glittering chandeliers, soft classical music, and elegantly dressed guests who smiled politely while exchanging polite words. He attended out of obligation, knowing every handshake and nod could strengthen his influence, yet feeling the weight of his carefully constructed world pressing down on him. Amid the crowd, he noticed her. Clara stood near a display of art, her presence quietly radiant. Her smile was gentle and her eyes seemed to hold a warmth that Alessandro had not seen in years. There was something in the way she observed the people around her without judgment, in the way her laughter came easily, that pulled at a part of him he rarely acknowledged. He approached, initially out of curiosity, but as soon as they spoke, he felt a strange calm. Their conversation was brief. She asked him questions that seemed ordinary yet carried an underlying interest, and he found himself answering with more honesty than he expected. Her attentiveness made him aware of how long it had been since anyone had looked at him without fear or expectation. The moment ended too quickly. Alessandro retreated back into the formalities of the evening, yet her presence lingered. He could not shake the feeling that something significant had begun in those few minutes. In the quiet of his mind, he realized that for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something he had thought was lost forever. As the gala continued around him, Alessandro found himself watching her from a distance. He was both captivated and cautious. He knew that opening himself to someone, even for a fleeting connection, was dangerous in his world. Yet he could not deny the pull that Clara had awakened. Shadows of his past loomed at the edges of his thoughts, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of warmth, trust, and perhaps something more. Chapter 2. An unexpected encounter. Alessandro Romano had not expected to see Clara again so soon. He had thought their brief conversation at the gala would fade like a distant memory, a flicker of warmth in an otherwise calculated life. Yet there she was, standing at the small cafe he sometimes visited when he needed a quiet moment away from the demands of his world. Clara looked up from her book and smiled, her eyes lighting up in recognition. Alessandro felt a pang of surprise at how natural it was to feel at ease around her. He had long grown accustomed to people maintaining distance, watching him carefully, fearing the power he wielded. Clara seemed different. She treated him like a person, not a title, not a reputation. They shared a table after a polite exchange with the barista, and conversation flowed easily. She spoke of small joys and simple frustrations, of the little things that made her days meaningful. Alessandro listened, intrigued by the way she found life fascinating, without needing it to revolve around grandeur or influence. He found himself sharing fragments of himself, small anecdotes from his youth that revealed a side of him few had ever glimpsed. At one point, Clara laughed softly at a story he told, and the sound struck something deep within him. It was not admiration or curiosity, but genuine delight. Alessandro realized he wanted to hear that laugh again, to see her smile without pretense. There was no danger in her presence, at least not the kind he was accustomed to, and yet he felt the old instinct to protect and guard himself rising. As they parted that afternoon, Alessandro felt a rare sense of anticipation instead of obligation. He walked away with a quiet certainty that this encounter was more than coincidence. Clara had entered a world where he had always been isolated, and he wondered if she could truly see past the shadows he carried. For the first time in a long time, he wanted to find out. Chapter 3. The guarded heart. Alessandro Romano found himself thinking about Clara more often than he cared to admit. Her smile, her easy laughter, the way she seemed to see him without fear or judgment lingered in his mind like a quiet melody. Yet with every thought came the familiar caution that had shaped his life. Trusting someone, allowing himself to feel something beyond control and strategy, was dangerous. Clara, unaware of the full weight of his world, noticed the subtle gestures that betrayed his growing interest, a lingering look, a softening of his usual commanding presence, a willingness to linger in conversation longer than necessary. She was drawn to these small glimpses of the man beneath the don, a man capable of warmth, kindness, and gentle attention. For Alessandro, every interaction with her became a careful dance. He wanted to reach out, to allow himself closeness, yet the walls he had built over decades held firm. He had learned that vulnerability could be exploited, that love could be weaponized in his world. And yet, Clara's presence stirred something dormant, something he had thought lost forever. One evening, their paths crossed again at a charity planning meeting. The room was formal, conversations stiff with protocol, but when their eyes met across the table, the tension shifted. Alessandro felt a pull toward her, a desire to bridge the distance that convention and caution demanded. Clara smiled, recognizing the unspoken connection, and in that moment, the world around them seemed to fade. Both understood the danger, though neither spoke of it aloud. Their attraction was undeniable, yet complicated by the realities of Alessandro's life. Clara admired the careful way he moved through his world, sensing both strength and fragility. Alessandro recognized the courage it took for her to approach someone like him with honesty instead of fear. As the meeting ended and they parted ways, Alessandro felt a rare mix of exhilaration and uncertainty. Clara had touched something deep within him, and for the first time, he considered the possibility that love, even in his dangerous life, could be worth the risk. The guarded walls around his heart trembled, threatening to give way under the pull of a connection that neither of them could ignore. Chapter 4. Secrets and Shadows. Clara could no longer ignore the sense that Alessandro carried a life far more complex than the glimpses she had seen. The warmth in his eyes and the gentleness in his gestures clashed with an intensity she sometimes glimpsed at the edges of his demeanor, a subtle tension that hinted at danger. She found herself quietly observing him, wondering what secrets lay beneath his composed exterior. Alessandro, in turn, struggled with the desire to reveal himself and the instinct to protect her. Every time he considered sharing his world, he imagined the fear in her eyes and the weight of the dangers she would face merely by being near him. The rival threats, the calculations of enemies, and the shadows of his past pressed him relentlessly. He wanted her close, yet every thought of closeness was intertwined with caution and restraint. One evening, as they walked through a quiet park to a charity event, Clara pressed him gently with questions about his life. Alessandro hesitated, searching for the right balance between honesty and protection. He shared small truths, moments from his past that shaped him without revealing the full scope of his empire or the dangers that lurked. Clara listened attentively, her expression calm, her presence grounding him in a way he had never known, despite the careful boundaries he tried to maintain. The whispers of rival organizations reached him, subtle but unmistakable. He sensed eyes watching, messages delivered through shadows, and the reminder that danger was never far from those close to him. Yet as he glanced at Clara, laughing softly at a private joke, he felt a flicker of defiance. Perhaps this time he could navigate the shadows while allowing himself a connection that felt real and human. Clara left at night with her curiosity piqued and her heart quietly stirred. She sensed the depth of Alessandro's world and the weight he carried. Yet she was drawn to the man behind the mask. For both of them, the line between trust and caution grew thinner. Their bond was becoming more than fleeting encounters. It was becoming a quiet, fragile trust that neither wanted to break, despite the dangers that loomed just beyond sight. Chapter 5. The first spark. Alessandro Romano had never relied on anyone the way he found himself relying on Clara. A sudden crisis in his business, a miscommunication that threatened a critical deal forced him to make a choice. He could handle it alone, as he always did, or he could allow Clara to help, even if it meant exposing her to a sliver of his complicated world. Reluctantly, he sought her guidance. Clara approached the situation with calm intelligence and a clear mind, asking questions and offering solutions that surprised him. He realized in that moment how rare it was to find someone who could think with clarity under pressure, and who could see past the surface of a problem. Her insight earned his trust, not just professionally, but emotionally. Working together, their interactions were charged with subtle intimacy. Alessandro noticed the small gestures she made, the way her hand brushed lightly against a stack of papers, the way her eyes lingered with quiet encouragement. Each moment became a thread, weaving a connection stronger than either had anticipated. Clara sensed the careful attention he paid to her, and it stirred a warmth within her that she could not deny. That evening, as the crisis was resolved, Alessandro allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The exhilaration of working with Clara, of sharing responsibility in a way he never had with anyone, made him feel alive in a way the solitude of his empire never had. He realized that trust, even in small doses, could be intoxicating. Clara, too, felt the shift. She had come to admire Alessandro's strength and decisiveness, but she also saw glimpses of vulnerability hidden behind the Don's commanding presence. In those shared moments of collaboration, a spark ignited, one that neither could ignore. It was not just attraction, it was the beginning of understanding, respect, and the fragile hope of something deeper. As they parted that night, Alessandro lingered in the shadows of the street, watching her walk away. He knew the danger that surrounded him, the careful calculations he had to make, yet he could not resist the pull of the connection forming between them. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of more than fleeting encounters. A spark had been lit, and it promised a warmth he had long thought impossible. Chapter 6. Close to Danger's world, Alessandro Romano inhabited rarely allowed for moments of peace, and that night proved no exception. A rival organization had made their presence known, subtle at first, a shadow at the edge of a parking lot, a whispered warning in a phone call, but the threat was unmistakable. Clara, unaware of the full danger, had accompanied him to a late evening meeting, her calm presence grounding him even as tension coiled in his chest. When the threat became immediate, Alessandro's protective instinct surged. He moved with precision, guiding Clara behind him, his every gesture a shield. She noticed the sharpness in his eyes, the controlled tension in his posture, and the weight of responsibility he carried not just for himself, but for everyone around him. There was no hesitation, no faltering. Alessandro was both calculated and instinctively vigilant, a man trained to anticipate danger and respond before it could strike. Clara's heartbeat raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. Yet even in fear, she saw vulnerability in Alessandro, a brief glimpse of a man who bore burdens alone and yet longed for connection. He communicated without words, a gentle squeeze of her arm, a guiding hand that reassured her despite the peril. Trust grew in the unspoken moments, and Clara understood why she was drawn to him, not just for his power, but for the rare glimpses of humanity he allowed her to see. By the time the danger passed, adrenaline still thrummed through their veins. Alessandro's controlled facade softened only when he was certain they were safe. Clara looked at him with a mixture of awe and empathy, realizing the heavy toll his life demanded. The experience, frightening as it had been, deepened the bond between them. She had witnessed the man behind the Don, a man capable of fierce protection, quiet kindness, and subtle tenderness, and she felt herself trusting him more than she ever thought possible. That night, as they parted in the dimly lit street, Alessandro allowed himself a fleeting thought he had long avoided. He could protect her, perhaps not from all dangers, but from the immediate shadows that threatened them. And in that thought, he felt a fragile hope taking root. Clara had become more than a fleeting spark in his life. She was becoming a part of his world, a reason to guard not just his empire, but his heart as well. Chapter 7. Confessions and closeness. Quiet of Alessandro Romano's study felt almost foreign as he gestured for Clara to sit across from him. The city outside thrummed with its usual chaos, but within these walls, there was a fragile sense of intimacy he rarely allowed himself. He had spent years concealing the truth of his life behind a carefully constructed mask. Yet now, sitting across from her, he felt the pull to let her see the man behind the Don. Clara watched him closely, sensing the tension beneath his composed exterior. She had noticed the small moments of hesitation, the brief glimpses of vulnerability, and now she waited patiently, giving him the space to speak. Alessandro's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he allowed the walls to crack. He spoke of the choices he had made, of mistakes that had cost him trust, friends, and perhaps a part of himself he could never reclaim. He told her of the loneliness that accompanied power, the constant vigilance, and the burden of responsibility that often left him exhausted and isolated. His voice was steady, but there was an honesty there that few had ever heard. Clara listened without interruption, her expression soft and understanding. She did not flinch at his confessions nor attempt to judge him. Instead, she offered empathy, a quiet acknowledgement that his past did not define the man he could become. Her presence was soothing, a balm for the scars he had carried in silence for so long. As the night deepened, the distance between them diminished. Alessandro reached for her hand, a tentative gesture that spoke volumes. Clara's fingers intertwined with his, offering reassurance without words. In that moment, attraction transformed into trust, and trust deepened into something that felt unmistakably like love. Even with the lingering shadows of danger outside his doors, Alessandro allowed himself to imagine a future where he could be honest and open without fear. Clara had proven that she valued the man beneath the power, the heart behind the empire, and for the first time in years, he felt the stirring of hope. Their connection was no longer just a spark, it was becoming a flame, capable of warming the coldest corners of his guarded heart. Chapter 8. Love-tested Alessandro Romano had never faced a challenge quite like this. The fragile trust he and Clara had built now trembled under the weight of misunderstanding. A message intercepted by a rival, a rumor whispered in the wrong circles, and suddenly the quiet intimacy they had nurtured was shadowed by suspicion. Alessandro questioned whether he could truly allow himself to love when the stakes were so high. Clara felt it too. She struggled to reconcile her feelings for him with the danger his world inevitably brought. She had come to admire his strength and kindness, but the walls he maintained sometimes made her doubt where she stood in his life. Miscommunication and assumptions began to twist their words, and for the first time, both wondered if their bond could withstand the pressure of fear and uncertainty. One evening, they met in a secluded courtyard, the tension palpable in the cool night air. Alessandro's eyes searched Clara's, trying to read her thoughts, while she studied his expression for reassurance. Words faltered as emotions threatened to spill over. Alessandro struggled to admit his vulnerability without appearing weak, and Clara wrestled with the urge to retreat despite the love she felt for him. A heated conversation erupted, not with anger, but with raw emotion. Alessandro confessed his fears, the constant weight of responsibility, and the terror of losing her to the dangers surrounding him. Clara revealed her own doubts, the conflict between her heart and the reality of his life. Tears and silent pauses marked the moments between them, each struggling to convey love without breaking under the tension. By the end of the night, there was no definitive resolution, but something subtle had shifted. Both recognized that their love was not fragile but tested. The fire that had ignited between them could burn brighter if they chose to face the trials together. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Alessandro and Clara each understood that love required courage. Chapter 9. Choosing each other. Night was thick with tension, the kind that only comes when everything one holds dear is at stake. Alessandro Romano had faced threats, betrayals, and the constant weight of his empire, but nothing had tested him, the possibility of losing Clara. The danger that had always lurked in the shadows now felt closer, sharper, and more personal. Clara stood beside him, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of what was truly important. She had seen the man behind the vulnerable, flawed, and fiercely protective side of him, and she had chosen to remain, even when fear threatened to pull her away. Alessandro realized that he could not retreat into solitude any longer. He had spent a lifetime guarding his heart, but now he had to decide if love was worth the risk. A dramatic confrontation with a rival organization forced the decision into the open. Alessandro acted swiftly, combining strategy with instinct, protecting Clara and neutralizing the immediate threat. Every move, every calculation was fueled not just by survival, but by the determination to safeguard the woman who had become his anchor. Clara, though shaken, remained steadfast by his side, her trust in him unwavering. After the danger had passed, they found themselves alone, the city's lights casting a soft glow around them. Alessandro took her hands in his, the weight of his emotions breaking through the restraint he had always maintained. He spoke plainly, acknowledging the risks, the fear, and the shadows of his past, but also declaring his unwavering choice, her. Clara's eyes shone with tears and relief. She had felt the strength of his devotion, the depth of his courage, and the sincerity of his love. In that moment, they both understood that their bond was no longer tentative. It was a conscious choice, a commitment to face life's dangers together, and to nurture the fragile, beautiful connection they had fought so hard to protect. For Alessandro, stepping away from the shadows of his past life was not easy, but Clara made it possible. For Clara, trusting him completely required courage, yet love proved stronger than fear. Together, they embraced a future uncertain yet full of hope, proving that even in a world ruled by power and danger, the heart could prevail. Chapter 10. A new dawn. First light of morning filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room where Alessandro Romano and Clara sat side by side. The world outside moved with its usual intensity, but within the quiet of their shared space, there was a peace Alessandro had never known. The chaos of his empire, the shadows of past rivalries, and the weight of his responsibilities seemed momentarily distant, replaced by the warmth of a love he had long thought impossible. They spoke softly, their conversation a gentle rhythm of shared dreams, hopes, and plans. Alessandro listened intently as Clara described the simple joys she wished to cultivate in their life together. For once, he allowed himself to imagine a future not dictated by strategy or danger, but by trust, companionship, and tenderness. Each word, each laugh, built a bond that was unshakable despite the unpredictable world beyond their walls. The city hummed outside, but Alessandro felt grounded. He had learned that strength was not only in power and control, but in vulnerability and trust. Clara had shown him that opening his heart could be a source of courage, not weakness. She, too, had discovered that love required courage, a willingness to embrace imperfection and danger in exchange for a connection that nourished the soul. As they moved through the day together, every glance, every touch, and every quiet smile reinforced the choices they had made. Alessandro no longer saw his life as a series of calculated moves and guarded defenses. Instead, it was a tapestry woven with trust, love, and hope. He realized that the shadows would never completely disappear, but with Clara by his side, he could face them without fear. By evening, they stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Alessandro wrapped his arm around Clara, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. It was a rhythm that promised companionship, resilience, and a love capable of outshining the darkest corners of his past. In that moment, he understood that he had found more than a chance at happiness. He had found a partner, a confidant, and a love that could endure anything. For Alessandro Romano, the Don who had long guarded his heart, the last chance at love had not been lost. It had arrived, gentle and unwavering, bringing with it a new dawn filled with possibility, hope, and the quiet joy of two hearts choosing each other above all else.